Hello, this is a continuation really of the first lecture. Again, just more of an introduction of multicultural children's literature. You already are probably getting tired of this, but I love it. Some things one can see for oneself. Other things depend on the telling of the tale. So we've done some definitions of multicultural children's literature, but we could expand that definition a little bit more, and I'm going to talk about that for a sec or two here. So multicultural anythingism can also include not just cultures, but social culture or identity culture aspects of different ethnicities, different groups of individuals, different races. So there's a kind of a bigger definition, and socioculture then means combining social and cultural factors. So we're kind of broadening things. I wanted just to give you a couple of examples, like the LGBTQ population could be considered a social identity culture, right? Because all sorts of cultures can be in the LGBTQ identity culture, right? All sorts of colors and religions and abilities and all that. So that could be considered an identity culture or a socioculture. Another good example is the deaf culture. That could be, again, an identity culture or a socioculture, because you're taking people from all over the place that might have deafness as part of their makeup, and that could be a definite culture. And in fact, from my understanding, deaf culture is a really big thing, and they don't want to even necessarily be considered to be in the disability culture. So again, that's something we could dig into later. Another example might be the Amish culture, right? So it's just a very specific, it's a religious culture, right? And there's some very specific tenets and ideas about that culture. We're going to be digging more into identity cultures later and defining some of those, and they do have certain traits and all that kind of stuff. So let's see, another one, skateboard. That skateboard culture, and that could be an identity culture. You could call it college culture, right? Drinking tons of coffee or whatever, staying up late and completing your assignments. Yeah. So, right. So that could be one. And I always throw this out. This is, for me, is a definite culture. And I always ask students to guess it, but it's just a trick thing, because you won't be able to guess it. But it's my representation of twin culture, right? So, because I have twins. That's Zoe on the left, impersonating Sherlock Holmes, and then her brother Miles on the right, because he won't dress up because he's been socialized in our society not to really do much in terms of dressing up for Halloween. So he's just Buddy Holly. Yeah, I don't know. He's an old rock and roller. So anyway, so twin culture, because I have twins. I'm a twin culture. So there's all sorts of ways to do this. There's all sorts of identity cultures. There's all sorts of social cultures, and you could come up with some of your own, right? Or some that you are aware of. And we'll, again, that's one of our assignments, so we'll work on that a bit later. So one of my cultures reminds me of this book, Maggie and the Pirate. And it's just these kids that get to play outside without any parents around, that they just get to do whatever they want. They're playing by water. Nobody's worried about it. They're drowning or anything. And that's how I grew up. I had a culture of just having to come in when the street lights came on. And I lived just a couple of doors down from the ocean. So I was young. My parents didn't worry about that I was going to drown, or that I might come across, I don't know, pedophiles out in the alleys of Belmont Shore, Long Beach, California. So anyway, this book really kind of typifies that, and I will post it if I haven't already, in case you're interested in looking at that. So one thing that Madsen says, I'm not sure where we have this article, but I like what she's saying. Throughout my practice as an early childhood educator, children's picture books have always been used as a critical tool for engaging children in powerful conversations that are developmentally appropriate, addressing issues of equity and social justice. I mean, that kind of just sums it up, really. I talked about it in the first lecture, how that we're really looking at this more, using children's books as a tool for powerful conversations, right? About equity issues, about social justice issues. And there's so many ways to do that. Here's one this is an example that kind of speaks to it and does a fairly good job doing it, but it's not first voice author, so I do have some problems with it. But basically, it's a book about Grace, who wants to be Peter Pan in the classroom play. So, they're kind of discussing, the teacher's talking about it, and one of the other students says, "You can't be Peter Pan, you're a girl." And then somebody else says, "You can't be Peter Pan, you're black." And so it kind of goes on, and then, at the end, Grace gets to be Peter Pan because she did the best job with it. And so it's just some simple issues about how gender and race could maybe just block the way or create assumptions with kids because of the stereotypical books they've read or their movies or their parents or the whatever. So there are really ways to kind of disrupt those stories by introducing other stories, for sure. And I like parts of this quote. It's important to start when children are very young, and to teach them to develop a tolerant attitude towards people who are different than they are. So, but we just got to take that tolerant out of there, right? Tolerant is just like a crappy little word, right? So we can just throw in a couple of these instead. But again, we open up kids' ideas. We open up their worlds more by providing lots of stories that show them people and views other than their own. And so that, Grace can be Peter Pan. What the heck? For sure she can be Peter Pan. So, again, another aspect of a good multicultural children's literature book is that they help children see the world all over around them. There's great stories that portray other lands, other countries, other cultures, other people operating in similar or same but different ways, all over the place in the world. So there's some really good ways to make children understand that they're not the only thing. The spotlight's not only on them, and especially when we're looking at the dominant culture ideas and ideals, that it's good that we can just kind of like shove that idea right out of the way, for sure. So I think this is interesting. If books can help us show children, how we're kind of connected and in the relationship. So the books help us see the world. The stories, the pictures help children. I like that. Read the world through the word. Read the world through the word, right? And so I think that's an interesting part of the quote. Sorry, I'm not supposed to switch slides while I'm talking. Sorry for breaking those words up. So read the world through the word. And I have a great example of a much beloved book by people that grew up in the U.S. A couple of students have gotten a little mad at me for kind of deconstructing this book. But okay, The Rainbow Fish. So this book is everywhere. It's marketed. It has a big messages in it, and you can get pajamas and stuffed animals, and teachers use it for all sorts of stuff. Teachers use it for the idea that it's really wonderful to share. That's what this whole book's about the rainbow fish finally learning how to share. Because the rainbow fish didn't want to share its beautiful, glittery scales with another fish who asked. And so the other fish said, kind of like, "Screw you, I'm on my way out of here. We can't be friends." And then the rainbow fish finally learned that in order to have those friends and not be lonely, that it had to give up some of itself. It had to give its little sparkly scales to all the other fish around there until it only had one left. And then guess what? It was so happy because it had friends. But it's a message of sharing, but it's really kind of a message of assimilation. It's a message of okay, you're supposed to take your identity, your beauty, and pass it out to everybody else so that everyone kind of can have the same sort of swagger, the same vibe, right? And that is just not necessarily a good message when we look at how diverse our world is. So like people are saying, some people see this book in a negative way. You change yourself to please others, give away your things. You have to bribe people to get friendships, right? Give up your natural beauty, your uniqueness. So the peer pressure, so that if you want to be liked, you got to do what they say, and you got to give up something of yourself. So shed your uniqueness and become like everyone else, and then you'll be liked. And that's just another name for cultural assimilation, which we talk about often enough in this class, right? That cultural assimilation is the process by which a person or a group's language and or culture come to resemble those of another group or their identity. They're all of it, right? So I've talked briefly about the dominant culture, right? So the dominant beauty ideal, and we'll go into that again some more with these wonderful books and not so wonderful books. The idea that there's this ideal that we have to live up to, that we have to assimilate, to be liked, right? To have friends. We got to give everything up. We can't keep our uniqueness. So for a while, I mean, now we're using salad bowl as, the U.S. is a big salad bowl. So it used to be a big melting pot, right? We're just going to throw all of us into this big pot and come up with just some sort of something that is, level that we're all in this, I don't know, we're all in the mix together, that everybody's adding to the pot or whatever, right? But and then we're all, it's normal. The melting pot is normal, but who defines what's normal? Who gets to decide? Again, it's the idea of who is the dominant culture, that all the stuff that has come before us, those are the models. And we're getting rid of a lot of them, right? But it's a slow process. It's a dangerous and painful process. If we look at driving while black, I mean, it goes on and on. It goes on and on. So the deal is that in order to disrupt some of those ideals, in order to decide what is normal, we have to get rid of the idea of a single story or a dominant culture story. And part of multicultural children's books have some guidelines. There's been some ratings, and I'm just going to go over them briefly. But so there are actual levels of multiculturalism in children's books. And this is a theory put forth by Banks. It's a very strong and popular theory, and it's been used all over the place. And I think there's definitely something to it, and some of the articles you're reading speak to it for sure. So we look at the different levels, and we're going to go deeper and deeper. We're going to start with the shallow ones and go deeper, right? So level number 1 is considered a contributions approach. So this is what a lot of us got in the classrooms. At least I did. I got a lot of it in the classroom when we were studying a culture. Something. We're going to look at the food. We're going to look at the holidays, the festivals, and not to say that food and festivals aren't important. Oh my gosh, they're lovely, they're wonderful. But that's a lot of ways that we enter into in somebody else's culture. And then what it does, it just kind of removes that culture or that identity, because it just kind of puts you off into some exotic sort of tourism. Okay, let's go look at this culture. Wow, isn't this exciting? So that level 1 is not necessarily the greatest place to be. I mean, it's a good start, right? But we don't only want to talk holidays. We don't only want to see costumes. We want to see relevant identities and cultures here and now, and we want to know about it, but we don't want to just do it in a really superficial sort of way. Right. So then a lot of times teachers is like, okay, it's Black History Month, or, it's Chinese New Year. So we're going to just do it all this way. So the contributions approach is really just like the entrance into looking at cultures. And it's a superficial entrance, because sometimes we really malign holidays, right? We really malign how we introduce cultures by just showing their dress up clothes, or their their chopsticks, or the maracas, whatever. So there's just ways that we haven't really done a fabulous job with this contributions approach at all. So introduction is hard to believe. It's hard to know this an introduction, but so an example of that would be, okay, when Thanksgiving rolls around, who do we talk about? We talk about American Indians, right? And we always talk about the Pilgrims. We just have this way of just highlighting what they did. They, saved the Pilgrims and all this. So a lot of it's inaccurate, and it's interesting, but it's not it's a single story, and it goes on. And then, a lot of times when we only talk about Chinese culture, it's during Chinese New Year's or Vietnamese New Year's. So we're going to throw in the Asians during that time and no other time. And we could say that, for when we're looking at Hispanics, Latina, X. I mean, all of that is, we're just kind of going a superficial way. So level 2 is kind of the same as level 1, but then maybe we're going to throw in some real people. We're going to throw in some first voices. So we're not going to really deconstruct how we've introduced the first stuff. We're still going to be exotic and amusing, entertaining, right? But maybe we're going to start looking at folk tales, and we're going to bring in some of the stuff, maybe told by first voice, maybe. And then maybe someone's going to come in from that culture. And again, kind of do maybe some superficial stuff, tortilla making, which is great. So we get a little hands-on, but we're still just only looking at just kind of a really surfacey sort of thing. We're looking at cultures that are just like, we're just going to cut them up so everyone can understand it. We're not going to talk about the history we're not going to talk about the ups and downs. We're just going to just do this kind of, oh yeah, this and this fun. It's Cinco de Mayo, so let's have some beer kind of thing, right? So again, these artifacts or these representations of some cultures, beautiful stuff, but still superficial. And unfortunately, those two levels are often used more than anything in schools, especially in elementary school level, in preschool level, is that we're just going to talk about the superficial stuff. We're just going to make these people not really real, these cultures or these identity cultures. We're not going to really make them real. We're just going to make them fun, right? So level 3 is a little bit, kind of digs in a little bit more. And that's the place where you're going to look at you're going to maybe really have some historical aspects that are more accurate. Or, I mean, in the case of children's books at the lower level, you're going to, make sure that you have lots of different representations. And maybe you're going to talk about you're not as beautiful as the ideal culture and stuff. So you're going to do those kinds of things, and you're going to do it in a more authentic fashion. And these are the hard ones. These are definitely, go back. It's not going to let me go back. So these are definitely harder to do than the first two, is that you're going to really kind of make sure that you're trying to get an accurate picture of really what happened. I mean, when we talk about enslaved Africans, and we're not going to show the pictures of them making, in the children's books, there's a fairly new book that they just kind of pulled because it was the enslaved people happy to be in the kitchen making a really beautiful apple pie recipe, right? And it just got all the way out there a couple years ago, and then just got jerked back because, are you kidding me, right? So we're going to look at really what happened on Thanksgiving in terms of the Wampano, I think, tribe. We're going to just get down to something a little more accurate, not just all this weighted over to the great white savior sort of thing, right? And we're going to talk about, immigration and the borders, and we're going to talk about struggles that women have had in the United States and really all over, and try to make their mark and try to be recognized as contributing to society, right? And we're going to talk about segregation and what happened on the bus when Rosa Parks has said, I'm not going to stand up. I'm not going to stand up anymore. I'm going to sit down because I'm tired. I worked hard today, and you want me to go stand up in the back of the bus and let all the white folks sit down in my seat, and I'm not going to do it. So again, and then the ideas of mass immigration, now people get leaving their homes because for all sorts of reasons, for dangerous reasons, and getting over here and certain conveying themselves over to the United States and other countries, and just the horror of all. So there's books out there that are developmentally appropriate that really can work. Boom. Oh, I can. Okay, I just learned something. So through the power of books, that they feel like they can be part of a change. And there's so many examples out there that they can look at a book and say, hey, wait a minute, what's wrong with this? And they can see how there's inequities in the world and their country, in the United States of America, and how they might be able to help with that a little bit, or at least understand it more. And that is the best quote in the whole damn world, really, right there. But an example of social justice, looking at books that talk about how some children in the world don't have, in the United States too, let's look at Michigan, don't have safe and clean drinking water. And so what you have to do to get that, and in some countries, how the children, specifically the girls in some countries, they have to walk miles and miles. That's what they do all day to get clean water, so they don't go to school, right? So they don't do that. They don't do that. And then you read those kind of books with kids in our country, and they're, so this was an 8-year-old, Rachel Beckwith, who read I think Last Drop of Water, something. It talked about like how kids don't have water, so she did fundraising, and other schools all over the place have done fundraising to help get more water coming in to places that don't have water, because they can totally relate from kid to kid, right? So that's like the really, those kind of social transformation. And this is not part of the level, so those are the 4 levels, but it's part of social transformation. Books that kind of look at us having a common experience. So this is a good example. Like, this is a father and a son looking at the father's father on the Vietnam Memorial Wall. So he went over and he lost his life fighting that war. And it's cool because they're Latinos right there. And so we're just, again, not always having the protagonist being the dominant culture. So there's all sorts of stuff going on with that. So these newer books that kind of look at multicultural topics or represent different things, they're just cool. So we're getting so much better. This is the cutest book I have. It's just so great. So what's important is that we're lifting up our society by reflecting all of the cultures in our society, right? So it doesn't pertain all the way to what this lecture is about, but I love that Langston Hughes, who we'll talk about a little bit more, and his contribution to the fabulous canon of Black and African American children's literature, is he used to saying that, what was he saying? Where is it? Okay. Americans' children are now in pressing need of literature that will give them back their own souls. And so I think that these first voice, beautiful, newer multicultural children's books are doing just that, giving back their souls. And it's just such an exciting time to be in this field and seeing the improvements made. And that's all I have to say. So thank you for listening to this, and I'll be talking with you soon.